idea
Yes,
the extent
yes,
that
give it a
it
good
could be.
one.
It was just my eyes, and that was it.
All right, let's get ready. Welcome everybody. This is the February 6th, 2018 meeting of the Finance and Warrant Commission. Let's start by doing the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, we'll start the meeting by granting permission to the Westwood Media Center to record and videotape this meeting, and also to announce that this meeting will be broadcast live. Also, wanted to know if anybody in the audience has interest in or plans to record the meeting today. Okay, hearing none. All right, so obviously I think everybody realizes that Mary Ann is not here today, so I'll be acting as the chair. The purpose of this meeting, I think we'll back up just for the purpose of those in the audience who may not know and the people watching on Westwood Media Center. We are in the beginning of our preparation for annual town meeting. We have had and will continue to have hearings on warrant articles. One of the major warrant articles every year is, of course, the budget. So today is dedicated to the budget. We're going to hear from Pam as well as from Mike and from Emily on behalf of the total town budget, the municipal side through Mike, and then through Emily we'll hear about the school budget. And then also, so everyone knows, we have public hearings and other warrant articles about a month from now at our next meeting, and then a week after that, March 13th, I think.
Yes,
We
yes,
have-
March 13th.
We have committee hearings in the FinCom, and during this next 5 weeks or so, our school subcommittee, municipal subcommittee, OPEB subcommittee, and long-range subcommittee will be studying the budget. So we will be spending 5 weeks kind of analyzing it on behalf of the town, and then we'll come back as a group and we'll talk about it in about 5 weeks, how our various committees all perceived it. And then we'll be able to make a recommendation on the overall budget after that. So we will be diving into it. So today is really an introduction to the budget. Pam and her team have been doing a lot of work, and we're really going to hear about where they're at formally for the first time. So with that as an introduction, let's welcome Pam Dukeman.
Great. Thank you. Thank you for having us in. And that is what we're going to do tonight, is that the Board of Selectmen have prepared their initial proposed FY19 budget. So we're going to go through that tonight and just kind of lay out for you what it is. And I'm going to do kind of the overall piece, and then Mike will do kind of the municipal details. So I do want to point out that the overall budget, we have the budget summary book, and we sent that out to everyone. We did send out to the committee by PDF, and if you want a hard copy, we're happy to do that for you. Just shoot me an email. This book is also online, if anyone wants to take a look. But this has kind of what the Selectmen's proposed budget is, as well as there's a whole section in there kind of on all of our financial material. Anything that you'd like to take a look through is in that document. So what I have tonight is just going through some of the slides from that book. And some of them are things that we've been through before, so I'm going to go move really quickly through some of it, but just to kind of lay out for you where we're at and what the Selectmen are proposing for FY19. So just to get started, we start with, what does our overall budget provide for? And we show this scale where we're trying to balance many areas. And we have shown this slide many times. But it is important that we keep trying to recognize that our finances really have to cover a lot of things, and our budget covers a lot of things. It covers not only the operating budget for school and municipal, which is what most people are familiar with, where we're delivering the main services to the community, but we also have to take care of our capital assets. We have to make sure we have appropriate reserves that maintain our bond rating and protect the town in case of emergencies. We have to address long-term liabilities like pension and OPEBs. We're always looking at what are the service levels for the town, making sure we're providing good services. And all of that has to be balanced against what is that doing, how we're paying for it, how does that impact the tax bill for our residents in town. So there's really a lot of things we're trying to handle within this budget. I think the Selectmen have really done a terrific job the last several years in making sure that we're handling all of these areas, and their budget that they propose each year addresses all of this. And I know the Finance and Warrant Commission, the Long Range Financial Planning Committee, and our town meeting have also done a terrific job in recognizing that we need to take care of all of these areas. It is a really difficult balance each year, and that's really because of our financing model. So this slide shows you our total revenue projections for FY19, $96 million. 80% of that comes from our tax base. And that's very standard year to year that we're funded 80% by real estate taxes. Very typical model for a suburban community in Massachusetts. We have a very low reliance on state aid. You'd see quite a different picture if you were looking at the revenue pie chart for a large city in Massachusetts. But this is a challenging model because we're funded through our tax base. We have to work in Massachusetts under a restriction on that tax base, formulas under Proposition 2.5. So it's difficult to try to always do what we want to do in the budget process while living within the restrictions of Prop 2.5. And really, if we want to kind of go out and generate more revenue, it's really back to our tax base, and that's a really fine balance. So it's always a balancing act. It's always kind of a challenge and a bit of a puzzle each year that we do to try to put together the budget because it's just a difficult financing model. Typically, that budget can provide for about a 2.5% to 3% increase for our operating budgets, school and municipal. That's pretty much our standard sustainable level year after year. What can help improve that and allow us to do better for those budgets? Certain things, if we have an increase in other revenue, such as state aid, a low increase in our fixed cost budgets, our health insurance, our pension assessments, and if we got in any new tax growth revenue from new development in town. Those are things that can all help the budget process. What can kind of make the budget tighter? Really kind of the opposite things. If we have reductions in state aid, if we have really bad years as far as the fixed costs, higher than normal increases to our health insurance or pensions, and then any kind of dramatic reduction in other revenue sources, such as a drop in the motor vehicle excise revenue or things like that. And there are several of you who have been on the committee for a long time, and you've seen all of these things on this slide occur. It can be a really bad year when all the bad things happen at once, a little bit of a better year when we get a break on some items. But a typical year is about the 2.5% to 3% if these other things kind of hold. Commercial value can absolutely help our budget and our overall finances. This line chart here shows the commercial value as a percent of total value over a several-year history for the town. And at one point, you can see on the far left, commercial value was about 25% of the total property value in town. And now in the far right, it's about 15%. University Station has certainly helped us. You can see in the last couple of years that we've had a tick up in the commercial value as a percent of total value. Before University Station, I think we had dropped down to maybe 11 or 12%. So the stronger our commercial value is, the more of that tax revenue the commercial property is paying, giving a little bit of a break to our residential property. This chart on the right, in our current year, commercial property, while being about 15% of the town's value, will pay over 25% of the total taxes in town. And that is because we have a split tax rate, charging the commercial at a higher rate than residential. So for the current year, the commercial rate is $29.30, the residential $15.09. Having that split rate saves our average home in town about $1,300 or 14% of their tax bill. So commercial property is tremendously important, helps pay more of the tax bill, provides a tax savings to the average home. University Station has certainly helped us in improving that situation. Just looking at a couple of quick slides on University Station because it's been so important to the town's finances. As we indicated, commercial value can provide tremendous help for our budget, not only in the value side, but in the actual tax revenue coming. So University Station, before the project even began, the Selectmen and other boards were working on what would we use this revenue for. And we talked about making sure we fund any direct costs to service the projects, such as increase in public safety or any impact on the schools. It could help us provide for growth for the municipal and school budget above those constraints that we just outlined under the limits of Prop 2.5. It would help us fund debt service for major capital projects within 2.5, so we wouldn't have to go to the community for debt exemptions. It would be able to help us limit the tax bill increase, help contain that growth a bit. It would help us with our reserve accounts to make sure we maintain that AAA bond rating. It's so important when we go out to borrow to make sure we get the best rates. And it would help us stabilize that split tax rate. As I mentioned, we were at a point where we were almost losing that split tax rate, and that would have been a tremendous impact on our residential tax bill. So these were items talked about before University Station came online. The original project talked in terms of increasing our new revenue by about $5 million, having associated costs to service the project of about $2 million, giving us new annual revenue of about $3 million. So a couple of years ago, this was what was foreshadowed and we were looking at, and then I'm just going to go through what have we actually seen come in. So again, this is a slide you've seen before, and we tried to show many times as that project was coming online, tried to show this at town meeting, talk again about how we were trying to use that money to fund as many areas of the budgets as we could. Starting on the left side, trying to take care of those direct service costs, making sure that we weren't impacting other areas of the community, either the schools or public safety, that if we weren't going to make services for other residents in town suffer because of the project. Again, the budget's above Prop 2.5 limits, our debt service, tax relief, trying to work on that tax bill, trying to get this revenue to work in as many ways possible. So this slide shows the actual revenue we have seen from the University Station project. Beginning in FY15 through now, we have had an increase in tax revenue, our tax levy, each year. About $565,000 in FY15, the bulk of the money coming in FY16, $3.2 million as the project really got built, $1.1 million in FY17, $179,000 in FY18, for a total to date over the 4-year period, $5.1 million. I just want to point out, the numbers we're showing there in each year is the growth in the tax levy in each year. So someone asked it to follow up to this slide once, FY18, did we only take in $179,000 from University Station? No, that was the tax growth that 1 year. So in total, the project pays $5.1 million in annual taxes above what the property there was already paying. This is all new growth, 5.1 million new growth. So the University Station entire project pays over $7 million in tax revenue to the community. So it's been a terrific help for our overall finances, providing additional revenue. With these numbers here, this whole project's about 2/3 built out. And the student impact has been much less than what those original studies had been looking at. And just specifically showing you how have we spent that money as it's come in the budget process. The biggest piece that we've done has been to help our operating budgets, about $2.6 million. So we're showing here what we've applied to the school budget and the municipal budget, really in the early years of the project. We were able to supplement those budgets above what we normally could do under our Prop 2.5 limits. We have had some direct service cost impact, about $215,000 for the schools. The municipal, in 2 budget years, we applied additional funds in order to increase our staffing levels in our police and fire department. $500,000 in FY15 or 16, and then in the current year, an additional $570,000. So these numbers here, once we apply that revenue to the budgets, we're repeating that amount every year. They're being built into the budgets on an ongoing basis. With capital, we had a one-time use of $975,000 that we put into our capital stabilization fund. And then with our most recent large project, the police station, we utilized some money from University Station to fund the debt service on that bond, about $800,000. And that, again, is an ongoing application of the funds. And then finally, each year since the money has come, we've been able to provide for some relief to that growth in our tax bill. We have what we've called unused tax levy each year. So $500,000 in the first year, $670,000 the second year, $279,000 in our current year. And what that means is the taxes coming in from the project. We're not building the budget up to meet that new revenue. We're taking in the revenue and using it to subsidize our existing level of budget, thereby giving every homeowner a benefit from the project. This slide, I just want to point out, is in that summary book. If people want to look further, is really the mechanics of how our tax levy works, how Prop 2.5 works. With the red circles, we're kind of just identifying our budget numbers for FY19, shown in the right column. Prop 2.5 lets you start at a limit from the year before. You can add 2.5% increase to that. That would be the second line down, 1.8 million. You can then add in an estimate for new revenue you might get, new growth. We're showing 450,000 for a budget estimate, and then 200,000 for new revenue from University Station. Since University Station has started, we've separated those two lines with University Station new growth and then all other growth on the other line. And that really tells us what our limit is for what we can tax. The line down in the middle in the blue shading, exempt debt, 1.4 million at FY19. That's the exact principal and interest for any bonds issued outside the limits of 2.5, and for us, that's the high school project and the library project. So the final circle at the bottom, 77.4 million, is what they call our levied capacity. The most would be allowed to raise in taxes. We are proposing the selectmen in this budget to raise a little bit less than that, as they've done each year. In the FY19 proposed budget, there would be excess levy of $479,000. And that's coming from the University Station project. So again, continuing what's been done each year is trying to take a little bit of that new growth, not spend to our top level, and apply that revenue out to all residents. Just showing here the unused levy, and as I said, 479,000 FY19, all coming from University Station. In FY18, we finished with $1 million unused levy, some from University Station, some from other commercial growth in town coming in higher than budgeted. Unused levy, again, is really a good tool to not spend to our maximum, take in revenue, apply it to everyone's tax bill, and also lets us use that money in future years. And finally, just in talking about our taxes, the town has not had a general override since 2007, so more than a 10-year period. That really is remarkable for a community funded like Westwood is, and being able to provide the level of services we do, particularly in our school system. That's really not typical. A lot of the school communities we compare to have been out much more frequently for general overrides. And we've really been able to do that in the last couple of years with the University Station revenue. So sometimes people are concerned, are we getting a benefit from University Station? My taxes haven't gone down, and no, they haven't, but they certainly would have gone up more if we didn't have that revenue to fund our budgets and we had to go back out with general overrides to the community. And then finally, when we looked at the exempt debt, it's the high school and the library bond. The high school bond ends in 2023, so we're on just those last couple of years of making the payments for that, a 20-year bond. And I think wonderful that the school still feels new and fresh, and we all still call it the new high school, yet we're in the final couple of years of paying that off. One last look, this chart, and there's a lot of information in the summary book about our average tax bill. This chart just shows the tax bill for kind of our mean or average resident bill in town, a home valued right now at about $604,000. The current bill for that house is just over $9,100. Under the current budget would go up to about $9,300, $273 increase. That might come in a bit lower, depending on what our final new growth is. And I'll just point out the chart on the bottom. The Department of Revenue does have on their website, they do annually a ranking from high to low of every tax bill for every community. So these numbers are from that. In the current year, Westwood is the number 17th tax bill of all the communities. But you can see that that's been pretty steady over the last several years. We've always been kind of 17 through 20. So again, I kind of know sometimes it feels like the tax bill is going up. We're not really out of line with what's happening to kind of the other communities comparable communities in the state. And again, there's much more on the taxes and tax bills in the budget book. And then just moving quickly, what does that revenue provide for? So in FY19, $96 million in revenue. The largest area of spending will be on the school municipal operating budget. Almost 70% of our budget is in that. That's where we provide the core services to the community. That's where we fund all of our teachers and police and fire and staffing. We're really trying to provide for stability to those budgets and really striving each year to have sustainable budget growth and stable budgets. Because this is the biggest area, we do have to look at what it costs us to increase that budget year to year. And really, for each 1% increase to the school municipal budget, it costs about $630,000. So it's very quickly, a 2 or 3% increase can add up into what that costs and how much of our tax levy that's taking. So now just a couple of quick slides on what are the selectmen proposing for the overall budget summary. So what are they doing in that balance in the areas they're getting to? So first, the operating budget, providing for an approximate 3% budget increase for town and school departments. The annual operating budget would be just over $91 million, and this little table shows you by category how that would be. School in the blue, municipal in red, our fixed costs $14 million in yellow, and then our debt service $6.1 million. Again, a quick little table with more in your budget books, but this shows for the last couple of years what have been the increases to the school and municipal budget. And as I mentioned, in those first couple of years when the university station funding came in, we did apply some of that revenue to give a little bit larger than normal increase to our operating budgets, 5%. School and municipal increases in FY16. We have returned in recent years and again in FY19 to our more sustainable growth level at that 3%. The fixed cost budget, in current year, our fixed cost about $13.5 million. This budget provides for all of our employee benefit costs for school and municipal employees. So health insurance, pensions, unemployment costs, payroll taxes, all of that. And we have a detailed listing in the budget book, but 13.5 in total. That budget is going up for FY19 by about 9.6%, or $1.2 million. And we show a little breakdown of those categories. Our pension assessment, health insurance right now is for 6% rate increases. We won't have that final number, that's an estimate until March. And we'll update this accordingly at that time. And then our other costs for some of our Medicare, payroll taxes, et cetera, about a 10% increase. So a really large category. We try to work to keep our fixed costs as low as possible, but it is a big bucket of spending in our overall budget. Looking at capital, the selectmen are continuing, as they've done the last several budget years, to really try to have a good, strong level of capital for municipal and school, making sure our buildings are well maintained, that our equipment is properly maintained and updated, so that our public safety departments have good equipment. So we're doing, as we've done the last couple of years, we'll have a municipal capital article, school capital article. We do have the sewer in a separate article because that's funded with sewer revenue. And then, as always, we will have an other capital article. And this right now proposes about $850,000. And as we've done the last couple of years, we're trying to do some additional projects above what we could do within the municipal or school articles. So the last couple of years, we've done different things, more kind of one-time projects, like replacing the high school turf field. For this year right now, in that $850, we have repair and update to a middle school elevator. We have a couple of town-wide projects, the pool, a large HVAC project, and the high school tennis courts. So the listing is in the budget book, but again, we're trying to do extra capital kind of beyond our base capital, just so important to continue to reinvest in our capital needs. The selectmen have been committed to that the last couple of years. And I think people, clearly see the results of that as they drive through town and see the condition of our fields, our buildings. I hope they've heard what I've said about this.
Pam, can we start
said
over from the
everything's
beginning?
Just a couple of final items, our stabilization fund, the main savings account for the town. The selectmen are proposing to continue, as we've done the last couple of years, a relatively small transfer, $100,000 from our free cash into the stabilization fund, helps us keep on target. This would give us a balance of just over $3 million, really close to our target, about $3.2 million. That's our target by industry standard and our financial policies. This not only protects us if we were to see a downturn in any kind of our revenue sources, but also is just really important part of our bond rating and helps us maintain that strong bond rating. And then finally, our OPEB liability, continuing with the work that's been done, maintaining a significant appropriation into our liability trust fund proposed for FY19, $1.4 billion. The bar chart shows you how much we have appropriated every year for the last several years. Clearly on the left, FY11, we were just getting started, only $20,000 a year. We were able to increase that over the last several years, primarily in 2 years when we had changes in our healthcare plans. We were able to take the savings from that, build them into an annual appropriation. So now we have a healthy appropriation within our budget funds that really right now meets what we need to be doing to stay on track with paying off this liability. So that's really the review of all of that. Again, just to kind of make sure people know, we have a couple of different budget books for you to look at all the data, the summary book, and then the detailed municipal book and the detailed school book. Between those three things, there's everything you want to know about the town finances and what's happening with FY19. And again, those are all online. I do think the selectmen have again, kind of put a really balanced budget forth for the proposed budget. And I just want to mention one last thing. One of the articles you'll have for town meeting, you'll hear from the schools, will be a borrowing article for them to start off on that new project with the MSBA for the school building project. We will fund that as a borrowing article. We will do that as a short-term debt. And we will then wait and see at a certain point if the larger school project gets approved. At that point, we can roll that short-term debt into the larger bond and issue a long-term bond. So we will approve that of the borrowing, but really minimum impact on the budget for FY19. So I think that's it.
Hey, thank you,
Happy to
Pam.
take any questions.
We should also acknowledge Selectman Nancy Hyde is here with us. Say thank you, Nancy, for being here. Any comments from you on this before we ask questions?
Well, Pam often refers to the Board of Selectmen and giving us credit. I just want to reflect it back on Pam and the staff. It's a pretty solid piece of work, and there aren't any major surprises this year, so it is a very stabilized budget, and we're very pleased with it.
Yeah. Thank you. I have a question, and Pam, I ask you every year, where are we on free cash, and how much of it are you estimating to use as a source in the budget this year?
Yep, we pretty standard on our free cash. We're currently proposing to use similar levels to what we've done in prior years, using that to fund our capital and to fund the $100,000 transfer. I can give you just take a quick peek. So we currently have the $100,000 for the transfer and $2.1 million applied towards our capital budget. So we currently have unallocated or unused at this point $2.8 million. Now that's about what we should have unallocated per our target. Sometimes as we go further in the budget process, the other items we need to address before town meeting are our budget supplements for the current year, including any snow and ice supplement. So we would be using a little bit more of the free cash to deal with that.
Okay, thank you. Questions, Barb?
On the new growth calculation for the budget, it's 450,000. That's the standard number you use, you've always used, so the 1.2 that we've experienced for 2018 was in the budget at 450?
Yep.
Okay,
So if you look on that slide, let me just go back.
Slide 10.
There's probably a quicker way to. So we're using 450, yes, that's our standard budget estimate. The year before, our final actual was 1.2 million. So it's important when we use the new growth that we don't, at this point in the budget, come in with a higher amount than we think we can achieve. If we went out and spent that and allocated all of that in our town meeting process, and then we didn't meet that new growth, and the new growth is not certified until the fall. So if we came September and we didn't meet that certain number, we'd have to go back, have a town meeting, and reduce our budgets. And that's difficult at that point in the year. So we use an estimate of 450. So in the previous year, it was 1.2 million, a little bit higher than it had been the last couple of years. We had some other commercial growth in town beyond University Station. In FY18 in particular, that was some of the car dealerships along Route 1. Those all came in line in FY18. But when our growth is higher than what we budget, that's where, I don't have, oh, I do. That's where we end up with what's called excess levy. So in this $1 million in excess levy in FY18, part of it was planned. We had said we're not going to use a certain portion of University Station. This part here is when that growth comes in higher than what we budgeted. And in a sense, this is a really good thing. To not use your full levy, first of all, gives us room going forward, but this is where we're not spending to that maximum capacity. We're getting in new tax revenue from new development and applying it to our current budget. So whenever we have kind of unused levy here, we're helping to subsidize our residents' tax bills. So in FY19, we're budgeting 450. We expect that number later in the process to come in higher. The force.
Out of curiosity, when has that budget number been 450? How many years ago?
Actually, it used to be 350 to somewhat recently.
But
Yep.
the actual number hasn't been 450 for.
Well, during the recession, it was much lower.
Yep. Yep, we've had some, good new growth the last several years, even beyond University Station. Some of that's coming from different commercial pockets, and some of it is coming from residential development in town. It's not that we have kind of big new developments, but we have a lot of kind of, any new homes being developed or renovated are pretty high-end, and that can contribute to the new growth.
And then the only other question I have about, on the fixed costs, you rather high increases on health insurance and, just wondering, are there any other things you can look at that can try to reduce those costs, or is that kind of, gonna be the state of life going forward?
Right now, this is about where we're at. I believe last year was about 8% also to the total bucket. We had several years ago, when health insurance was skyrocketing, where this was 15% increase to this total bucket. We had a couple of years where we were able to make changes to our health plans where this overall bucket was 0 or 1%. But the 8 or 9 right now is about where we're at. One of the big items here is our pension assessment is a 15% increase. Pension systems in Massachusetts are on a mandated funding schedule to reduce and pay off the unfunded liability by 2030. So starting in about 2000, the state implemented mandatory funding schedules over a 30-year period. So we know this number, it's been about 12 or 15% a year. That's certainly quite a large increase. So we're about halfway through that mandated funding schedule. There's nothing really we can do with that. The health insurance, at this point in the process, is about a 6% increase. We will update that for you when we get our actual rates. If you followed the news a little bit, the GIC has some interesting things going on. As they try to look at their plans for FY19. You know, they're trying to work to keep health rates low, trying to do some of that through plan design, and there's been some ups and downs. But we will know by March kind of what our actual health insurance budget will be, and we'll be able to update this number. But unfortunately, other than that, that is about what we're looking at for this overall bucket of funds.
Okay, just a quick follow-up on that pension. So that 12 to 15% increase is going to continue for a number of years? And that doesn't include any kind of changes to underlying assumptions?
And the only thing that really can change that, so they have to, you know, they do their actuarial updates every couple of years. You know, they have to kind of do whatever adjustment they have to do to the assessments to the communities to make sure that they pay off the liability by that deadline. So the only thing that can help that a little bit, and they've had help the last couple of years, is kind of what's happening with their invested funds. So, you know, 4 or 5 years ago, they weren't getting their returns on the investments. That kind of helped that. That's improved. So, you know, we might see a little bit of relief over the next couple of years. But most of our assessment right now, I think we do have more detail on that in the budget book. I think it's almost 70% of what we're paying in the assessment each year is towards the unfunded liability.
Any other questions for Pam?
Pam, I was just wondering, you mentioned the short-term borrowing associated with the schools. How short is that, and how much is it?
Yes, so we would probably, yeah. So the warrant article at town meeting just says the authorization to borrow. But then the town treasurer, Jim Gavin, will work with the selectmen on the timing of that. He most likely would issue like a 1-year bond, 1-year short-term bond. And then a year from now, when the schools know what the next phase of their project is, he can roll that bond again. Or, you know, whenever they're ready to go with a larger project, when that gets approved, he can roll that in and then issue that for a long term. And that's typically what we do with some of our larger projects, where there's a design portion and then a construction portion. If those are approved at 2 separate town meetings, we'll just kind of roll the design short term until we're ready to issue that long bond.
All right, Pam, thanks so much.
Great, thank you.
Next up is Mike Jillette, Town Administrator on the municipal budget.
Okay. So I'm quite happy and proud to be presenting this budget tonight. It's not flashy. It's the FY18 budget with a few minor modifications, but it maintains a very high quality of services that we provide on the municipal side. And that's due to the quality of the staff that we hire and their dedication to their jobs, and that they continue over time. We're also, I'll note, considered a full-service community. In addition to the core services that we provide, police, fire, public works, and then a support service of administration and library and things like that. We provide additional services. Youth and Family Services is a service, for instance, that maybe 60 communities provide in the Commonwealth. We provide services to the elderly population, rides to medical, Meals on Wheels, and other things like that. And we also have curbside collection of our solid waste disposal and recycling, and that you know, not every community has that. Our core service budget makes up about 2/3 at the police, fire, and public works, and the remaining 1/3 goes to administrative costs, library, recreation, and human services. I should have the clicker, right? Is that up?
Where's it be at? Christie. Did you click her? There you go, you should just go to the clicker.
Didn't notice that wasn't on. So, this slide deals with a summary of the FY19 proposed municipal budget. It kind of breaks down the categories of expenditure by service area. Public safety is basically the bulk of the budget at 42%, or $8.7 million is expended there. Public works, we're proposing at 25% of the budget at $5.1 million. General government at 13% for 2.7, and library and recreation at 12% at 2.5. The community and economic development department, which is the newest area of service that we've consolidated, at 5% at 1.1 million, and then all the other is at $500,000. So that's the $20.6 million budget increase that we're proposing. Not the budget increase, it's the budget that we're proposing for the upcoming fiscal year. To layer on additional information about the salary makes up 73% of our budget that we expend each year. 88 of the municipal staff are in our public safety departments. Municipal departments employ 215 people. 169 of those folks are full-time and 46 are part-time. The expense side comes in at 27%, or $5.5 million. The budget increases over time have been moderate. If you averaged it out over the period of time we've got here dating back to 2009, the increases are about 2.5% a year on average. You'll note that the fiscal crisis that occurred in FY 2000 and FY 2001 were mitigated primarily by holding our employee cost or the cost of living increases to zero, which is effectively the largest portion of our budget, as we saw, at 73%. This year and next year, we've had what can be termed stable growth or usual growth at 3.1% and 3.6% respectively. The increases to the municipal budget include contractual obligations that we have with our employees, increases necessary to maintain the services, and continuation of any budget increases that we incorporated into the past budget, in this case FY18. Salary is going up in the upcoming year from $14.7 million to $15.1 million, or a 3% increase at $445,000. And the expenses are going up from 5.3 to 5.5, or a 3.3% increase, or $175,000. If we look at the budget areas where the increases are occurring, general government is being proposed at 4.7% increase, or $120,000. Half of that increase is in two areas. One is the town clerk, you'll see why a little later, and the other half is the information systems budget. Public safety has a 2% increase at $72,000. Community and economic development is 1.5 at $17,000. Public works is 3.9 at $193,000. And in that instance, it's incorporating some additional expense that will be needed, and I'll show that again later, for maintaining two of our new buildings that just came online this year. Human services is at 8.3 million, 8.3% or 60% increase, and culture and recreation is 6.4% increase, or $104,000. So the entire budget is proposed at 3.1 percent increase, or $620,000. The salaries increase, as I've noted before, at 72%, or $445,000. If you break that down, that increase is cost of living and steps, which is 83%, or $370,000, followed by some position changes that we made in the current fiscal year, or for $25,000. We increase, or proposing to increase, the administrative hours at the COA from a part-time position to a full-time position at a 5% increase of $22,000. And the addition of a part-time librarian, teen librarian for the library, 6% increase, or $28,000. Those two proposed increases in staff were talked about and considered last year and are going forward this year. On the expense side, the expense account is at 28% increase for the upcoming year, or $175,000. Most of that increases are in the following categories: building maintenance for DPW, $87,300, and that most of that, or pretty much all of that, is for the new police and fire station. Software maintenance and licensing is going up by $22,000. The town clerk has an additional election in the upcoming year, so it's $21,500. The library, which has to increase or have set its budget for new books and materials, has to be based as a percentage of their budget, is going up by $20,000 for that reason. Various expenses in DPW are going up by $12,500, and finally, Finance Commission printing and postage for your materials is going up by $4,800. So that accounts for $168,000 of the $175,000 increase. Finally, I'll just end on the area of our budget that has been the most significant change over the last several years, since 2014, which is our public safety staffing. As I mentioned before, it accounts for 42% of the budget. 40% of the actual municipal staff. There's currently 88 people working in the police and fire department. It was predicted that the service would be the most impacted by University Station, and it is. The actual call volume has significantly increased since University Station opened up in both police and fire department. The impact study that had been done prior indicated that we'd have roughly 20-odd staff members that would have to be added to the two departments. And since the development began construction, we've added 12 firefighters, 5 police officers, and 1 dispatcher. There are no changes in this proposed budget this year in the staffing level for either department. However, there will be modifications that we'll be working through on the way that we allocate the resources and deploy manpower. It will be more based on the calls for services in the fire department. And what I mean by that is we will be returning to something that was pre-University Station, where we manned differently the hours of 8 to 8 a.m. to 8 p.m., because if you do an hour-by-hour accounting of the calls for services, that's the peak hours that the demand occurs. And so the new chief, is going to be implementing some modifications in the way he staffs the department and employs overtime so that we have staff during those hours. It not only increases, what I want to also note is that most of those calls for services are for ambulance services. It is the one service that we can, and it's conducted by the fire department, that we get revenue back from. So it's not necessarily just an increase, that there'll be some offsetting revenue increases that we expect. It also will have an impact on the way the overtime is expended. If we fall below a certain level of staffing, there's an automatic recall, and the automatic recall is by anybody and anybody that can come in, and there are some minimums that are required to pay people to come back. If we can minimize the number of times we have to call back because we haven't fallen below those limits, and those happen oftentimes during those peak hour demands, we also have some more effective use of overtime expenditure where we're using it on a regular basis rather than on these callbacks that may or may not have a benefit to them. Finally, Selectmen will continue to evaluate the calls for services. University Station will be continuing to grow. There's 100 units of condominium development that are being proposed right now, and to go forward. And as the University Station continues to be built out, we'll continue to monitor the calls for services and see if there's further modification we need to the staffing levels of the two departments. The only other thing I'll add is that we finally, no, I shouldn't. We're close. I won't say anything for fear of jinxing the thing. That's it. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Mike, thank you. I do have a question for you. When are the union contracts next to be negotiated?
They're almost wrapped up now.
Almost wrapped up.
Is that,
now.
is that?
Yeah, that's good. I was kind of alluding to. Yeah, and
We're close.
the next time, they run out June 2019. So,
Only 19, not 20?
So the,
20 for the police and fire
Yeah,
when we
okay.
get done.
That's what I thought.
okay, great. Other questions for Mike? Julie?
On slide 3, where you list out by budget the fiscal year 18 to 19, what's the 500,000 that's new in 19?
So-
At the very bottom of the pie chart, you have under library rec at 2.5 million, we have another 500,000 listed as other.
Oh, other,
What was that for?
that's where software licensing was
Oh, okay.
in that category, and capital.
Okay.
Municipal capital.
Okay, great.
These are, and I want to distinguish that it's a smaller operational capital that we.
Right, we go through that one.
That budget.
Right. Can I ask a second question?
Please.
Thank you. So I know there's been a lot of work through the years around the energy savings, and we have an energy manager, and I don't expect like a dollar amount, but do you have a sense of how that's helped mitigating costs for budgets?
Well, it's helped in a couple of ways. First, we've achieved a lot of those energy saving improvements by getting monies back from the state,
Right.
either a grant through Green Communities or incentive funding from Eversource. I think Eversource is the only one, but those two means have paid for, probably over half of what we've gone forward with. The other benefit that we get from it is that on an annualized basis, these are energy efficient reductions, and so we've seen corresponding annual decreases in the energy cost. Now, it's not clean reduction in energy cost because there's a couple things happening. One is that as we become more efficient, the energy companies are charging us more for the energy, and so what we're doing is avoiding the increases that we would otherwise realize. And the second thing is that as we bring on some new buildings, as we did with the police and fire station, those energy, we have more energy consumption because those are just larger buildings. And so there's, although we're paying less per kilowatt, or we're reducing the kilowatt
Right.
in the existing buildings, we have an increase on the other end. So we're not necessarily seeing a complete decrease every year.
Right. Makes sense.
Any other questions from FinCom for Mike? Before you guys go, can I just ask if there's any questions from the audience for Pam or Mike or Nancy, or we have them on this subject? Well, thank you, guys. We look forward to studying this in the subcommittees with you.
Thank you.
Thank you so
Thank
much
you,
for your
Mike.
time. We'll welcome up the school department and the members of the school committee in the audience.
As you're going like down Metropolitan Avenue towards High Park, it's right
Take
there.
up Cindy's suggestion, meanwhile, we're gonna try to figure out a workaround up here, but, a couple of things let's do that we'll take out of order. First of all, Cindy made the smart suggestion that we approve the, minutes from the December 5th, 2017 meeting. So, does anybody have a motion on?
So moved.
Motion to approve, is it seconded? Seconded, all those in favor?
Aye.
Anybody opposed? I'm abstaining, anyone else abstaining?
I'm abstaining because I wasn't
How
there.
many abstaining?
Three,
No,
four.
1, 2, 3, 4 abstaining.
Four abstaining. Okay, and also, if we could, Barb has an announcement to make.
I just wanted to mention that the Roy Leonard Humanitarian Award is coming up for nominations, and Roy was a member of FinCom, and just trying to get the word out that there's information on the town website for nominating people, but, you know, I'm sure we all kind of know people that do the types of things that we're looking for, you know, small, helpful ways of, you know, that help the community. It's not for town employees, it's for individuals, so I encourage people to look at the website and look at the people that have won in the past and nominate.
What, do you know when the nominations are due, Barb?
Oh, Nancy left. March 5th, I think. It's in the beginning of March.
Okay, that's great. That's great. So what we're likely gonna do, at Howard's suggestion, is turn this screen around so you all can see it. The rest of us can use the printouts up here. So we're getting close.
Why don't you talk about the public hearing?
Oh, yeah, let's do this too. While we're waiting.
People use
their here we hard go. copies
Yes.
Yeah.
That's great. So if we
Yes.
can turn that around, careful with the
Yes.
wires. Yeah.
There we go.
Visible to everyone who wants to see it?
Move a little closer if they. Yeah, I know.
Okay. Sorry, we're Mac-based.
That's all right. You got, your problem is you gave Steve Willett the night off.
That's right.
Bring him next time, yeah.
Note to self next year, bring Steve. Okay, great. All right.
Yeah.
Next year,
Thank
you
you.
can
Well,
email it to us.
we'll welcome Superintendent Emily Parks and Finance Director Heath Petracca from the Westwood Public Schools to give us their preview of the budget this year. It's an exciting year, some interesting things coming up, so we're looking forward to hearing it.
Great, thank you for having us, and I want to acknowledge that I also have Assistant Superintendent Allison Borchers, Director of Student Services Abby Hanscom with me tonight, and Carol Lewis, who's the Chair of the School Committee, and Tony Mullen, who is our School Committee Liaison to the FinCom.
That's great. Thank you all for being here.
Okay, so I'm happy to talk to you tonight about our proposed FY19 operating budget. I'm going to talk about the operating budget proposal, and then I'll turn it over to Heath, and he's going to say a few words about our capital budget. So I just wanted to start by giving you a quick overview about our process, in that this is my first year as superintendent presenting a budget to you. So we've had a good process that started back as early as the summer when we began meeting with members of the Selectmen, with Pam Dukeman, with Mike Jillette. We've had a budget steering committee with those folks that's been meeting monthly throughout this, just to make sure that we are kind of communicating early on about the budget picture and what our needs were going to be. We've been part of the long-range financial planning committee, so that's been an important process for us. This year, our FY19 budget was developed, as it always is, by the cost center leaders in the school department. And they did that with guidance from the school committee about what the school committee's priorities were. We were very mindful of what our district goals are. And I, along with Heath, did a bit of a listening tour of the district. So we went to all schools. We spent time talking with faculty and staff about what they perceived the needs to be. So we had a lot of information in this process. We also decided this year as a district leadership team to do a multi-year look back at our actual spending in all of our line items, line by line, over the last several years. And so the proposed budget that we have prepared has made some adjustments to line items because we want to make sure that our budget is closely aligned with what we really believe our actual spending is going to be based on this sort of historic look-back process. So when our cost center leaders turned everything in, their original requests topped 6%. And we knew we were going to need to kind of make some choices based on that. So we went through a good process, and the district leadership team really coalesced around what our top priorities are, and this budget reflects that reality. So I think that the proposed budget amply provides for the district needs. I feel really good about it. And there are some things that are still our wishes that were left on the cutting room floor after that process. So my proposed budget for this upcoming year is a 3.3% increase over FY18. About $1.1 million of that is for contractual salary increases to meet our collective bargaining obligations. So that's in the neighborhood of about 2.6%. The 3.38%, sort of hearkening back to what Pam was discussing earlier, feels like, to me, an ample but also a responsible and sustainable percentage. And so to provide a little bit of context for that increase, and this also harkens back to some things that Pam discussed, you know, Westwood is a community that has not had an operational override for a long time, and it's really quite remarkable when we look what's happening in some other school districts. So when we look back, and some of us, like me, have been around long enough to remember these years. You know, FY07 was kind of a tough budget year for us. We actually were laying people off at that point. As you may recall, the community had gone out for an override and it failed. And then the following year, we were able to have this rather dramatic increase in our school budget of nearly 13%, where we kind of were able to get back those positions and then grow the budget quite substantially. And that was fortunate because the economy collapsed shortly after that, and so we had a 0% in there for a while, and some pretty modest budgets for a number of years. We have certainly reaped the benefit of the new growth at University Station. We had a couple of really healthy budget years in there, you know, over 5%, close to 6%. And now we're back to kind of this steadier, what feels like kind of a typical kind of steady 3.8% growth. So the highlights here, as I said, 3.3% increase over FY18, which represents no cuts to programs or services. That contractual salary increase I mentioned of $1.1 million. But in addition, we are able to do some things with this budget, which is exciting. So we are proposing the addition of 8.75 FTE, that's full-time equivalent, positions district-wide. That does include 5.6 FTE for special education positions, and I'll say more about that in a few minutes. And one of the priorities that the school committee really asked that we look at is to take a look at some of our fees. Specifically, we honed in on our kindergarten tuition. So currently in Westwood, half-day kindergarten is free, but if a parent wants to send their kindergartner to full day, then they pay $1,800 a year. That's pretty unusual in Massachusetts. We're one of only about 67 communities out of 300 and some who have full-day kindergarten who charge tuition. And the reality is that in a community like Westwood, virtually everybody sends their student to full-day kindergarten. To us, it really feels like a core part of our program, and so we really would like to eliminate that fee. This budget represents the beginning of a 2-year plan to reduce that tuition to 0. So here are our major budget categories, and what you'll notice here is that salaries are by far the largest budget driver in the school budget, accounting for 86.5% of our budget. That makes sense. We're a people-driven organization. That's what we do. And if you take a look at the other categories that are up here on the chart, and sort of add them all up, the net non-salary is actually a decrease of a little over $18,000. And I just want to emphasize, didn't cut any non-salary items that directly impact students. So we weren't cutting curriculum resources or instructional supplies. We were really able to do that as part of that look-back kind of adjustment process that we did. So to understand the budget situation, the important context to understand is the way that enrollment is shifting in the district. This is kind of the story of this budget. So up here you can see a graph of our district enrollment, and this graph doesn't look terribly dramatic. So for about 10 years, the enrollment of the district has been more or less the same. It's fluctuated up and down a little bit, but not by much. It's been trending down for the last couple of years, and next year will be the 10-year low. But if you look at the district enrollment broken out by level, you can take a look at sort of an interesting and different story here. So if you take a look at the blue line, that represents our elementary population, and you can see that the elementary enrollment has been trending downward. In fact, we've experienced a 15% decrease in our elementary enrollment over a 10-year period. And that is not insignificant. So a 15% decrease is about 220 students. So we'll have 220 students fewer in the elementary level next year as compared to 10 years ago. And to provide a frame of reference for that, 220 students is more kids than currently attend school at the Deerfield. And it's about the same number as attend school at the Hanlon. So that's a pretty significant swing for us. At the same time, however, there has been this enrollment bubble that's been making its way through the district. So if you take a look at the green line, that's the middle school enrollment. And you can see that the middle school enrollment is kind of going up and up and up. And it climbed until 2014, 2015, and then it plateaued, and the enrollment's been kind of hanging out at about 800 kids. And now it's finally going to start to decrease next year. So we've really been kind of riding out that enrollment bubble at the middle school. Over the last several years, we've added a number of positions at the middle school in core academic areas and also in the arts, in PE, and we've kind of had to staff up the middle school. So the good news is that looking ahead to next year, as we're going to start to experience some relief at the middle school, every available space at that middle school is used right now for teaching and learning. We are amply staffed for next year, so we won't need any additional staff at the middle school next year. At the high school, though, which is that orange line in the center, the bubble is hitting the high school and is coming through the high school over the next few years. So the enrollment at the high school will continue to climb. And for that reason, we are experiencing some growing class sizes, and we do need to add some additional staff there. The biggest class in the district is currently at grade 6, so that bubble is moving to the high school. And just to sort of underscore that point, here's what's happening with the high school enrollment. So you can see next year we'll be at just over 1,000 students in the high school, and we're going to keep climbing for the next couple of years, and then we'll start to trend downward there. The impact of that is that we are starting to see some bigger class sizes. So You can see here that particularly in the area of science, about,
May I interrupt for a second?
please, mhm.
Why don't these two graphs match?
Which two graphs?
The high school enrollment and the previous one?
It's showing a different time period there, I believe. Mine is like minuscule in front of me right
No,
now,
no,
so, yes.
these two, the previous
It's showing a different time period.
Yeah,
So this is 2009 to 2018.
I'm sorry.
And this one goes to
two, but none of these numbers match any
They
of these
don't.
numbers.
Well, I
Anyway.
literally can't see my numbers
Oh, I
in my
think they do.
printout.
Yeah, no, they do.
They do.
They do, I'm just
Yeah,
kind
they do.
I
They match.
apologize.
Okay.
The red
It's just
dot, the
longer
red
time
dot is
period.
where the prior graph ends.
Yeah.
For high
Yes.
school.
Got
Does
it,
that make
got
sense?
it,
Yeah.
yes.
Okay, phew.
Sorry,
Okay.
sorry.
So you can see at the high school in
Yeah,
science.
exactly, that's probably just doing that.
Yeah, we're at about 33% of our classes there with between 25 and 29 students. And 25 to 29 students starts to feel pretty large for us at the high school, so we would like to get that number down. The middle school, as I said, we're going to start to experience some relief there, so we won't be looking for additional staff. The elementary enrollment, as I said, has been declining, but it's actually a little more complicated a story than that. So the enrollment has been declining at the elementary, but it isn't shifting in the same way across all 5 elementary schools. So, and that's interesting because given the size of our schools, small shifts in enrollment can actually create kind of a large impact in terms of class sizes. We don't have that many sections in each of our schools because they're small schools. And so when it comes time to sort of divide up the students you have, small changes in the numbers can create some real difficulties. So if you look here at the chart, you can see that the enrollment at the Deerfield has been trending down, and in fact, next year will continue so that we'll have 170 kids. That's our projection for the Deerfield, which is quite low. So this year we have, I believe, 19 kindergarten students at Deerfield, and we're projecting to bring in another 19 next year. So it's one section of incoming kindergartners there. But on the other end of the spectrum, you can see that the enrollment at Downey is actually going to be increasing next year by 20 students, right? So it's not the same trend. Hanlon, about the same. Martha Jones, trending down. Sheehan, trending down. So that is important for us to be thinking about in terms of the budget picture. So it has some implications for short term and also long term. In the short term, what it means is that we are taking staff that currently exists, we're taking positions, and we're reallocating them across the district. So the first thing is that we'll be reallocating positions from elementary to high school. So you can see here, we'll be reducing 2 teachers at the Deerfield next year, but we need to add 2 teachers at the high school in science, and then also an unallocated position that we may divvy up among departments. Whereas we'll be reducing a teacher at the Martha Jones, though, we also need to shift not just between levels, but between elementary schools. So we'll need to increase some staffing at the Downey. So I just put this chart up here not to get too deep into the details of what we'll be doing, but to show you that there's going to be a lot of movement, but the net impact to the budget is actually 0, making some of those changes. So beyond all of those changes, there are some additions to staff that we need to add. So at the elementary level, we're looking to add a couple of positions, and these things really do have to do with some changes in enrollment and some scheduling issues. So we're proposing adding 2 full-time literacy paraprofessionals at Downey. And this has to do with next year's grade 1. I should have a little asterisk because since making the slide just this week, we've gotten some new enrollments. So we may actually be proposing to do something different with these positions, but we'll do that within the same number that I'm proposing here. And we're looking to add just a little fraction of some specialist time at the Hanlon School as well. And then we're looking to add some positions at the elementary level that aren't related to class size, but are related to some other needs. So one of the things that we're thinking a lot about in terms of our district goals and priorities has to do with social emotional learning and some trends and concerns that we have. So we're looking to add a full-time, what's called ABA tutor. It stands for Applied Behavioral Analysis, but basically it's somebody who would be working flexibly across the district in all elementary schools to respond to some articulated needs we've heard from teachers around social-emotional learning. And then we have a big initiative right now around science across the district. And the model we have for science is just very inquiry-based and hands-on. And frankly, we're finding that there's a tremendous amount of stuff involved with what we're doing in science education in the elementary school. So we'd like to add somebody to manage some of that, a part-time position. And that's really all of the general education additional staffing that we're looking for in this budget. So then if we turn our attention to special education for a second, you know, as I'm sure you know, special education is the most volatile part of any school district's budget. There's this interrelationship between legally mandated services and changing student needs and the school budget, and it's hard sometimes to forecast. But we've done a lot of work looking at the students we know we have to think about what our best estimate is. The two largest drivers in special education are tuition and transportation, and the good news is that we're actually projecting a decrease in those two drivers next year. But we do have some needs in terms of staffing internally. That decrease in tuition and transportation goes to offset the increases in staff. So next year, we really need to expand a program that's called the Westwood Applied Behavioral Analysis Program. We call it WABA. It's a specialized program. It's a district-wide program, though it's housed at the Downey Elementary School. And it serves students who are on the autism spectrum. We've seen a big increase over the last several years in students with those particular needs. That's not unique to Westwood. That's a much larger trend. And so we need next year to split our program into what we're referring to as lower WABA and upper WABA. So within the elementary, but kind of younger kids and older kids. And that's to accommodate an increase in the number of students, and but it also has to do with meeting some regulatory requirements we have around age grade spans all within the same classroom. So the good news about this is that you know, we've worked hard over the last probably 10 years to really increase our capacity to serve all students in district pre-K to 12. And so the number of students that we have in out-of-district placements at this point is very, very low. And you know, that fits with our values, that it's important to us to educate students within their community, if at all possible, if we can serve them well. And the good news is that's also financially quite responsible to do that. So when we can bring these programs in-house, we often can do it at a lower cost than sending kids out of district. So to that end, though, in order to create this lower WABA program, we need a whole team of people, and so we're proposing these positions, a full-time intensive special ed BCBA teacher, 3 ABA tutors, some specialized speech and language, and part-time occupational therapists to put together that team. And then we have two other special education staffing requests not related to the WABA program, but other needs. So we're looking to add a part-time instructional assistant at the elementary level. That's just to meet some of our service delivery requirements for students' IEPs. And then a 0.6 FTE speech and language therapist. That's due to our increased enrollment at the high school, and also we have students whose IEPs afford them access to public education until age 22. And we need to provide some services for those students. And we also are proposing a decrease in staffing at central office. That doesn't happen often. But we have some changes in the responsibilities of the district professional development coordinator, and so we're proposing a 0.4 FTE decrease for that position. kindergarten tuition reduction, I alluded to that before, so this would be year one of our two-year plan to eliminate the kindergarten tuition fee. It's currently $800. We would like to reduce that to $900 next year, and then the following year it would be 0. The impact to the FY19 budget to start implementing this two-year rollout is an $85,000 reduction to our kindergarten tuition offset. So that represents about a 0.2% increase to our operating budget. And then our non-salary accounts. So as I mentioned, we really did a very careful analysis of the non-salary accounts this year. The net change amounts to a decrease of a little over $18,000, and so that reflects additions to some line items, reallocations from one line to the next, reductions of other things. And I just put up here some of the big changes. So we have a science initiative right now. We need to further increase some of our online science curriculum materials at the middle school. We had a wonderful grant last year from the Foundation for Westwood Education to get a writers' conference going at Thurston. It was successful. We want to keep it going. We need to fund that in the budget, not continue to rely on grant funding. We experienced a sort of unexpected mid-fall cut from a state grant related to professional development. We're really feeling the impact of that, so we need to fund that. We are looking to increase our special ed contracted services. We have some kids with some really significant medical needs, and so we're going to try having a certified nursing assistant on a contracted basis. That's a pilot for us. We're going to see how that goes and consider bringing it in-house in a year if it's successful. And then finally, at the state level, the reimbursement rate for circuit breaker has been decreased. So the promise is 75%, but now it's going to be 65%. So we need to reduce our offset accordingly. As I mentioned, we have reductions in several line items. So in that look back, there were things we realized, things have changed for us that we, for example, used to have a pretty healthy advertising budget, but we don't put big ads in the Globe anymore. And we do things online, so we realized we could reduce about $20,000, something like that. Took a look at our photocopier, maintenance contracts, this kind of stuff. So we were able to make those kinds of changes. We also took a hard look at our cost savings in the utilities area at electricity and fuel based on actual spending. We've had these energy saving initiatives. We've installed some energy efficient boilers. We've got some solar projects. So we were able to take some reductions in those areas. However, the reductions in those areas we largely reallocated to some other areas that we've historically overspent, transportation and maintenance being the two primary ones. And when you put it all together, we had that net decrease of $18,000. So I just thought I'd throw this up here about how does Westwood compare in terms of per pupil spending. So this is like minuscule on the screen here. I'll narrate it for you. So the circle here to the right, the red circle represents where Westwood is in the per pupil spending, right? And so that's like $16,500 somewhere in that. This is FY16, by the way, because it's the most recent data that's available from the state. And the other red circle in the center of the screen is where the state average is in terms of per pupil spending. So I think it probably doesn't surprise people in Westwood to hear that we spend a little more than the state average on our students. And yet, when I look at sort of the neighboring communities there, you can see right next to us, for example, is Needham, right? We're about at the same level that Needham is. That feels about right to me when I think about those two systems. And we're nowhere near the top. So if you look over towards the right side of the graph, this is where you're getting into Newton, Brookline, Dover, Sherburne, Lincoln, Sudbury. That dot way up at the top that's practically off the chart is Concord, Carlisle. So they are truly an outlier. And we can't rival them. They're at about 21,500, I think.
I think we should be trying.
So, this feels about right to me. I feel like this is a community that invests in education. That's clearly one of the community values. And yet, I think we get a good value for our money, right? We're not spending at the level that some other communities are. So what's missing? As I said, there were other things that we were interested in looking at that didn't make it. I keep talking about this mobile science lab, which I know is a favorite idea of Allison Borchers. And I just put it up there to say that when we first go through this process, like, we do think expansively. We're thinking about innovation. It's like, what would we do if we could do anything we wanted? And some of those ideas then, unfortunately, quickly got put aside. But when I look at the things that are up here, there are things that are reasonable. I mean, we would have loved to eliminate the kindergarten tuition fee in its entirety this year. We just didn't think that that was possible. There are other fees that we'd like to look to reduce. We weren't able to include that here. We'd love to add an additional custodian at the high school, just decided not to do it this year. And I would say that in general, when we were putting together this budget, we were very mindful of the fact that we have these larger building needs and that we are going to have to engage the community in that conversation, and we really wanted to come in with a very reasonable budget. Yeah. So we have one additional slide for the capital budget, and I'm going to ask Keith to talk a bit about that.
Sure. Capital budget for FY19 is pretty straightforward for next year. It's level funded at $867,000. And we find that as fortunate because for about a 10-year period there, we were funded at about $406,000. So over the past couple of years, this new level of funding has really helped us to, maintain our buildings that much more. There are 7 major categories in our capital budget. First being technology. So for $225,000, we're looking to expand the one-to-one program down to the 3rd and 4th grade, and also it's a continuation of our one-to-one computer program in the upper grades. Under FF&E, and I'm really only going to give you the highlights of some of these because some of these lists are really long. So under FF&E for $129,500, three of the highlights are we're going to be doing the final phase of the middle school furniture replacement. So over the past few years, we've been replacing all of the furniture, student desks, through the capital process. It also goes for custodial equipment that we regularly try to keep up with, as well as outside storage unit containers, both at the Hanlon and the Deerfield, because those 2 buildings are really tight for space, so we need to get some of that stuff that we can outside the building. Under HVAC for $96,000, we're going to take on phase 1 of installing air conditioning in classrooms on the 2nd floor of the middle school. About 6 to 7 classrooms. This will, I don't know how many phases this is going to be, but it's going to be ongoing as we can do it. We're also going to upgrade the Downey and the high school HVAC controls. That's the back-end software for those controls, because even the new high school, as we continue to call it new, it's it's about 14 years old. So we need to continue to maintain that building. We're also going to replace the heating pump at the Sheehan. That's just a necessity. Under roofing, we're going to put $100,000 aside for roofing. I know that was a comment from last year's FinCom. I think Deb, you were on that subcommittee. FinCom had the question about, we didn't put money aside last year for roofing because we had other priorities that year. But this year, we're putting that money aside. And as you know, with capital funds, they roll over year to year. And the idea of the capital budget is to sort of accrue funds, so at the point at which you need to replace a building, you have the funds to do it. So we're putting some aside as we can. Under repair and maintenance, $256,000. This list is probably like 45 different items, but it includes all the carpeting and flooring for the district, paving repairs district-wide, Deerfield and Hanlon fire alarm radio box replacement, district security camera upgrade from analog to digital, addition of an ID card access to the main entrance and the garden entrance at the Deerfield Elementary School, additional security cameras at the middle school, also an installation of a push-button handicapped access for the main office, guidance, and library at the high school, so where students can go up and just press the button. Under copiers, these are usual numbers, 60,000. We are generally on a 5-year replacement plan or 1 million copies, whichever comes first. Or it depends how many calls I get as that goes. Pam alluded to earlier, things that are not included in this capital budget, that are included outside this, is the replacement of the middle school elevator. So that was very fortunate that the town could do that for us as well, because that's a big chunk. It's about $175,000 to replace that elevator. So, and next year, we're not asking for any vehicles, so that's the capital budget.
Finally, I would just say then that the details behind all of this is available on our district website. Every one of our budget documents is there, all of our spreadsheets, the executive summary, all of our exhibits, and that the school committee is going to be holding its FY19 budget hearing at its meeting next week on the 15th, 7 o'clock, the high school Little Theater. And we are happy to answer questions.
I've got a couple questions.
Sure.
First of all, this is great. Thank you for all this information. How do you project out, or can you project out the out years in enrollment? What's the process of that?
Yeah, well, not that great. So, honestly, so, I mean, when we say our projections for next year, when we're looking at our class sizes, we're literally rolling them over, and then in terms of incoming kindergartners, we have census data about students who are eligible for kindergarten. We did add an extra layer this year that we've never done before. We sent a mailing to all of those people who had students who were, in terms of their age, eligible to enter kindergarten, and we asked them, could you let us know in the next 2 weeks, do you know definitely I'm sending my student to public school? I know I'm definitely not, or haven't made up my mind. And so we're pretty confident in our kindergarten numbers. We counted yeses as yes. If we didn't hear from you, we counted that as a yes. But it was helpful information because it changed things quite a bit. We did a couple of years ago, as part of our
Master
capital
plan,
needs
yeah.
master plan study, have people who did like a longer term projection about enrollment. People who
Demographers.
no,
and-
I was going to say yes. Know how to look at demographics.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And do you know, I mean, this is more relevant to your
Yeah.
bigger question
Yeah.
about the future of the school buildings in this town, but do you have any reason for why the things are shifting this way? Are we getting older? Our house is getting bigger? Is it the effects of the recession? Is it,
Yeah.
what's causing these changes? These are fairly dramatic.
So I'm not sure. I mean, I have my personal theories about people not having as many babies
Yeah.
when the economy is in a downturn.
Yeah.
But I do think that if we were to look back in the enrollment of the district, it is kind of cyclical. I mean, it feels like kind of a 20-year up and down. So for example, when I first got to Westwood, which was like early 90s, the enrollment at the high school was 450 students.
Wow.
And it's been, when I left the high school as principal in 2011, it was about 680, right? It's been going up and up.
And the Deerfield
And
was closed for a period of time.
The Deerfield was closed. I think it was mothballed when I first got here.
Yeah.
We rented it out
For
to
lack of
a
need.
Catholic
Wow.
school.
And then we took it back.
Yeah.
We brought it back online. And so, I don't know, but I suspect it may have something to do with, in communities where people are raising their children and then they get to the point where they sell their houses and somebody else comes in
Turns
with
over.
younger
Yeah,
kids.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's
Yeah.
consistent with other towns? It's not-
Yeah, yeah.
It's a whole Boston area
Mhm.
trend. The Museum of Science did a study.
Oh, all right.
And it's the baby boom is over. Is part of it. So
That'd be interesting. I'd be interested to read that.
Possibly be property values, and
That's what I'm
because
wondering.
the middle school and high school is trending almost exactly the same, yet, obviously, the elementary, not so much, and so, is it the lack of availability of entry-level houses? Because once the kids are in the system, then they stay,
Mhm.
obviously through the middle school and the high school, and that would
Right.
seem to make sense.
Right.
But it's the, is,
That's a great question.
I guess, do they stay? I mean, is that true?
That sixth grade class,
Mm-hmm.
what is their percentage of increase over the 7 years that they've been in school
Mm-hmm.
already? Like, when they started, what has that
Right.
percentage?
Right. That would be interesting to look at. Yeah.
I think it's a lot,
For-
just based
yeah.
on,
My son going through Martha Jones, I think they added like something like 25 students from kindergarten through 5th grade.
Mhm.
And yet at the
Each
Deerfield, I don't
class
think
went
we
up.
added any in that class, so.
Yeah. I mean, I think some of it probably has to do with where houses become available in
Right.
town and, sort of, you know,
Trends there.
and the cost of the houses in different parts of town, yeah.
And the opposite trend you're seeing at Downey, is that strictly a result of the Westwood Station?
So I don't think it is strictly as a result of that. I mean, it's partly as a result of that. So we currently have 39 students in the district who reside at University Station, and 19 of those students are at Downey. We have a couple of students who are in other elementary schools because they lived in Westwood prior to moving to University Station. We allowed them to stay in their original district, but it's been a fairly even distribution. If you look at it, it's about 4 per grade level. So certainly that accounts for something, but you know, we're projecting that Downey's enrollment's going to increase by about 20 students next year. That's just based on the incoming kindergarten numbers. That's not because something's happening at University Station in that grade.
How much of that is also because you have some of your special ed programs that are housed there, and those kids could be at other schools?
Yeah, for the incoming kindergarten, not much.
Not,
I mean, some, but.
I mean, overall,
I don't think that that's accounting for the trend, yeah.
It's, as part of the review for the school project, presumably the planning, we always say to the planning board, do you guys have a comprehensive, I'll say, set of goals, or at least understanding of how housing is changing? So for example, we have, mega mansions being built where Salt Box Capes used to be, but we also have, new apartment and condo projects, as Rob mentioned, coming out of University Station, and also maybe in Islington Center. So how does that impact you? Are those guys kind of communicating with you about housing stock and how that's changing?
Yeah, we are talking about that, and I mean, as we get into this next phase of the project, I mean, frankly, these are all the things that we need to start looking at in earnest, right? Yeah, I mean, I, had a conference call with Nora and some others about some of these issues just the other day.
Last question for me, Heath, on the question of capital, how's the Wi-Fi enhancement project coming that started last year?
It's complete.
It's complete?
Yep.
Excellent. Came in on budget and
Oh, absolutely.
everybody's
Yep.
happy?
Everybody's happy and
All right.
it's working. And yeah,
Awesome, congratulations. Congratulations. Tom?
Quick question on the elementary enrollment, and is there a point where you would redraw the district lines? I grew up in the Downey neighborhood today, but I went to Pine Hill, so.
Right. Well,
I'm the only one who
superintendent,
knows what school that is.
yeah.
Him.
Superintendents joke that when you start talking about redistricting, it's because you're planning to go leave and find a job somewhere else, because it gets people kind of upset. Yes, redraw the line. For example, one of the things that we'll be talking about next week at school committee, very modest redistricting, but we're looking at University Station, and going to be talking about should that effectively be what we call a swing district or a buffer zone, where when people move to University Station, it's with the understanding that they could be assigned to either the Downey or to the Deerfield. Deerfield is open for business, right? We could definitely increase our students there, and we would do that thoughtfully. We wouldn't move any kids who are currently at Downey. This would just be for new students, and we would guarantee that families stay together and all of that. But it would give us some flexibility in terms of our class sizes. But to your bigger point, this is exactly the conversation that we have to have as part of the building project discussion, right? I mean, if you look at, we hear a lot from parents about class sizes, and they come to talk to us when they feel like the class sizes are getting too big, right? And the truth of the matter is, if you look at our elementary class sizes across the district, our bigger problem long-term is that our classes are too small right now. So we have these class size guidelines. The school committee spent 2 months reviewing those class size guidelines, looking at all the research around academic achievement and class sizes this fall. Basically, it's 18 to 22 kids for K to 3 and 18 to 24 for grades 4 and 5. 27 of our classes right now are below our class size guidelines. And that's because we have this target that we think is educationally sound and financially sustainable, and we can't hit it because of the configuration of our buildings, right? If you get a grade at a particular school that's 29 kids, that can be one section of 29, or it can be two of 14 and 15. And so there's, a certain kind of inefficiency right now in given our size and the fact that we have 5 small schools.
So would you speculate, do you think, is it the housing availability that's the number one driver, if you had to pick one?
For
That's
the Downey?
No, for the elementary's enrollment
Yeah.
decrease of 16%, because, well, I asked that because I don't think that's going to change in the next number of years.
So I have to say, honestly, I don't know that I would speculate that. I don't have any evidence to suggest that that is, in fact, what's happening. I'm not positive. And I think we do need to look at that, so we have a long-term
A lot of work to do.
understanding. Yeah.
Thank you.
Questions?
Mike, I have one. It looks like in the special ed area that you're expanding in district. What does that, besides WABA, what does that include? Because it looks like there's a lot of FTEs coming in, yet day tuition is dropping, so I realize it evens out, but it must be more than just a WABA expansion.
Not in this budget, it isn't really. So in this budget, there was sort of that one slide, that's a teacher, 3 ABA tutors, some speech and language, some OT. That literally is a team that will be in one classroom serving some number of students in WABA. And then there are really only 2 other part-time positions that are related to special education. So we have several other specialized programs in the district other than WABA, but it's not reflected in.
And so they're not increasing as well?
No.
Any other questions?
Thanks.
As we did with Nancy Hyde, we should recognize and thank Carol Lewis and Tony Mullen for being here from the school committee. Thank you guys for coming, we appreciate it. And we know all the work that you guys have done to help them get here. Anything you guys want to add to this, not to put you in the spot, you don't have to, but anything you wanted to add from the school committee's perspective?
No, I just commend Emily, this is her first year as superintendent, she's done a bang up job. It's a pretty, simple, almost plain vanilla budget, and no extravagances, and, so I think I would say, I speak on behalf of the school committee that we're, pretty pleased, right? Perfect. Can I say that?
Never question.
Well, it looks like,
Thanks for the opportunity.
yeah, it looks like you guys did a lot of moving things around smartly and stayed at a great number, so that's, took a lot of creativity. And I know the subcommittee will look forward to diving into it with you guys. And as we did before, anybody from the public have any questions for these folks? Excellent. Well, thank you guys very much. We know it's an early day and a long day for you guys, so thank you for
If
making
anyone has
the
any
time.
input on tomorrow's weather forecast,
Yeah.
I'll take that now.
And for anyone in the public, just to make sure you know, we do have our public hearing on the warrant articles Monday, March 5th. That could spill over to the 6th, but that's, we'll be taking up a lot of different things, including the budget, without going back over this. And then we'll have our final public hearings, and we'll vote on our recommendations on Monday, March 26th. Okay, any other business that anybody would like to raise in the FinCom? Anybody have a motion to adjourn?
Second.
Second? All in favor? Aye. Opposed? All right, thank you.